Everybody? So, welcome to the stage leader. You okay, Richard? So, yeah, thanks for the introductions. It's there for years. My mom has always had a big joke with me. She says, "You know, Chris, one of these days you're going to write a book, and it's going to somewhere be along the lines of where am I and how did I get here?" And hopefully it's on a yacht somewhere or something. But the reality is I've probably been underestimated for a lot of my life. A lot of times people say, well, you know, Chris is doing that. I thought he was the guy out in the bar drinking with his mates. But the reality is it's been a lot of hard work, or a little bit of hard work, a little bit of luck, and the most of it has been around the people that I've surrounded myself with. Including my mentor, who's having a cigarette, I think, outside. Is there a picture? So the question that I get quite a bit is, who am I, or where do I come from? And so he's Filipino. He doesn't look Filipino. He's Australian, but he doesn't speak like an Australian. So kind of this is the ongoing thing that if you ever go to an international school that you go through in your life. And it's a little bit startling in the beginning, but it's one of these things that I've personally embraced later on. Because understanding the cross-cultural relationships, for me, between Australia and the Philippines has been very beneficial for my career, for the projects that I've done, and just pretty much for the success that I think that me and my group have been a part of. But the answer to the question is, these are my parents, Ken and Francoise. My dad is German, Filipino, British, born in Trinidad. And my mom is French, Yugoslavian, born in Australia. And my wife over there, Alicia, is Australian, Indian. So my son has a lot of different, we don't know if he's going to be able to grow hair yet, but hopefully he will. So anyway, so part of my growing up was really about, I guess I call it breaking out, because in your life you go through these different phases where you need to step out, but you're nervous to step out. What's the best way to step out? So my brother and I, we went to these international schools, and Mike's over there. And unfortunately, you can't exactly work at a McDonald's when you're here in the Philippines and you're in international school. For one, our Tagalog is terrible. But number two, it would just seem a little bit funny for the most of it. It's just hard. It'd probably be hard to be accepted for all sorts of reasons. So during our summer breaks, yes, we would do odd jobs, not just working gas stations, but I worked in printing companies where we would load the press, and I worked for Pizza Hut, where I was a Pizza Hut delivery driver. And any money you needed for ice cream or to go down to the beach was earned by ourselves for what we did, the labor that we put in over those summer breaks. And that was pretty key and crucial. I think it was a good lesson, and as young leaders, I think as we become successful in the Philippines, we need to encourage that. Because quite often there's that mentality here that if I do well, then maybe my kids don't have to work as hard, or they don't have to do this, or I can set up mistakes and they can relax. The reality is we've got to enforce that drive to success. So, yeah, so my story was I went to high school here, and to be honest, probably got into a bit of trouble. I was a bit of a naughty boy, and this is just character building and character shaping. Some of the guys I went to school with here are here today, I'm happy to see. But I met a teacher later on in life, and he said to me, you know, Chris, you were a bit naughty. You know, you got in trouble, you got suspended for a couple of things here and there. You were never a mean kid, and that's important, you know. And he said some of the best men in life were naughty boys. And I think that also comes down to breaking out as well, because as a young boy, you end up trying to look for, you go outside your barriers, you continue to do it, you get slapped on the hand, you go, okay, can't go further than that. And now in business, of course with ethics behind it, that's what I'm trying to do. Trying to think of what everybody else is doing. Everybody has a bunch of great ideas, go out and do it, but then actually execute. Because a million people have a million ideas, but in order to execute it, you got to go out and actually do it. So, having said that, if I can go back, I went to high school here and then went over to boarding school. So, from the international school over to a military school in Australia, well, military/British school where we did wear military uniform twice a week, and then the rest was very high shorts and high socks and Cobra hats and all this kind of stuff. And our prayers were in Latin, and our war cries were all in Latin. This was a big change for me from the international school and the way that it was. But it certainly gave some structure to my life. Well, after I finished high school and university, moved back to the Philippines to start up a company that I thought was going to be a success. It was a cheese company to bring cheese from Australia, Italian-style cheeses, over to the Philippines. Because in 2005, we didn't see all the types of cheeses that you have today in the supermarkets and SNR and all these things. There was a little bit of something that was lacking there. So I called the company Say Cheese, because I thought that was pretty cool. And I met with a guy by the name of Freddy Garcia, and he was probably my second mentor in my life. And at that time, he was just finishing up his term as the chairman of ABS-CBN. And he said, you know, Chris, this is a great idea. You know, this is kind of normally for me to get involved in business, I got to be at least a 40% owner in order to get things going. But you know, because he was going to be the financier, I had no money at the time. Anyway, after a few years of discussions, he decided to come in at a 30% owner, and he gave me 5 million pesos to get this project off and running, which is pretty exciting. I think I was just turned 22 at the time, so I said, great, awesome. 22 years old, got this company, Say Cheese, had my business cards, I was ready to go. I also, at that stage, started working for my father, and that's been part of my life has been working 2 jobs. I've constantly held 2 jobs because if one failed, at least I've had income from another. And I've had 2 jobs for a lot of it. Anyway, working for a family company is a great thing because you have a lot of perks that come with it. It's easy to rise up the ladder. I was immediately made COO, child of owner, and you immediately get respect. No, not really. So the reality was, I found I didn't enjoy as much working for my family business because the family business had restrictions. It was great, but the structure and the strategy is really for the family as it goes forward. So even though your electricity might be paid for in your house, or your house might be paid for, or all these other things that sound great, the actual disposable income that I had was quite a little bit. I think it was 20,000 pesos a month back in 2005. So yes, 20,000 pesos a month, 5,000 pesos a week. It's enough to get by because everything else is paid for, but it's not enough to start saving for a house if you want to do it and you want to do it quickly. So anyway, so I had plans to make Say Cheese grow big and quickly get on out of there. But in 2005, unfortunately at that stage, my dad got sick in Australia. And my brother was there, my mother was there, and so he was actually put in a coma for, he was in hospital for about 10 months a year. It took him about 2 years to recover. So at that time, that was my first, I was at that pivotal point where I said, okay, now I'm here in the Philippines, I'm 22 or 23 years old, you gotta run it. So I was pushed out into the deep end. So that was an interesting spot for me. And the day that he did go into a coma, I remember, part of the board in his company, they fired a whole bunch of people. And said, okay, people got nervous, people started reacting in a certain way. So I thought to myself, okay, now's the time, get up and take charge. So at that stage, I said, okay, every check is no longer 2 signatories, it just becomes my signatory and it goes through. So from the paper, the pencils, all these things, I started going through that. So, and then I realized, okay, this Say Cheese business, this is not gonna be able to run, because that's gonna take too much of my time when I have other responsibilities to take care of. So, Say Cheese, I gave the money back that was given to me to start that company, and I thought I'd take it on at a later stage. By the way, that company now is called Mama Lucia, and they do about 60 million pesos a month worth of sales from that into SNR and stands and all these things. But anyway. That's life. So what happened was, at that stage, I immersed myself in the work, and I decided that the way to get knowledge around the business that I'm in is to surround myself with the people that understand this business, which was, of course, the friends of my father who I trusted. So I did that, I stuck with them, I listened to them, and the life learnings out of that taught me to, I guess, break out a little bit to become more of a man. My sister was still in school at that stage, so I also then had to be a bit of a dad to her. And and deal with questions like, oh, is dad gonna live? All these kind of things. Oh, we don't really know, and all that kind of stuff. So that was a big learning experience for me. Good news was, my dad did get better, and 2.5 years later, he got better and he came back. And as I think Bud said it earlier, there's only one boss. So when he came back, of course, he was the boss, and I think at that stage I was ready to run, ready to go and try the next thing. I made friends with a guy that worked for Darcy Lalonde over there, and he was the country manager, I think at the stage, a guy named Mike Ellis, and he hired me as a project manager for Northgate Orenso, which used to be Orenso that was bought out by Northgate. And then this was a good opportunity for me, so I said, okay, I'm going to join this. And speaking with my father, he said, okay, if you're going to join this, then you're out. So your car, all the different things that you have, you've got to pay for these things. So you're going to appreciate the value of money when you leave. So okay, well then, let's do it. So I did it and realized how expensive life is when you don't have that backing from others around you, especially in family company. So anyway, I did it and went through 3 years or almost 3 years where I didn't take any holidays. I think I took about a week and a half through that 3 years if I go back through it, and other than the regular normal holidays where you have your BlackBerry connected to you. But during that time, it was a good experience for me, and the company did very well. So I rose from project manager to a project director, which I was able to then understand how to manage managers and work with people and work with teams. And then from the project director role to country manager, where we had about 500 people here, and we moved from Eastwood to Ortigas. And then after being country manager for a year, we sold some good deals, and then I was fortunate enough to become the regional director for service delivery, which positioned me in Australia and had Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. So again, I would say to my mother, I don't know how I got here, where am I, how did I get here? But for some reason, it was a bit of fun, and in the end, started to make a little bit of money, and which was exciting. But along that way, I mentioned I met. I'll talk a bit about mentors and ecosystems later, but I met Darcy Lalonde, and he was part of the mafia group that we call each other, where we have a good group of friends that seem to believe in each other, and that's been part of our success. And the fact that we believe in each other is probably why we do well. Okay? Nobody ever says, this guy works for me, or I work for that guy. We work together with each other. So from company to company, our little mafia has gone from group to group, and it's done okay. And I think that's really important as a young leader to always know that you work with people. Nobody works for you, in my mind at least. So, moving from Northgate Orenso, I had a call from Darcy. I believe he was in Canada at the time. He said, so Chris, what's happening? What are you doing? And I said, well, I started this little company called Figari, a construction group, and I want to build this up. And he said, oh, great. Maybe you can do some building stuff for us ashore. And I said, okay, well, then he said, well, there's the IT and facilities position, just whatever you can do, you want to come over. And the reality was, it was for a lot less money than what I was earning at Northgate Orenso. But sometimes you got to take a step laterally or sideways, and sometimes you have to take a step backwards to go 3 steps forward. And this was one of those situations where I trusted my group, trusted the people that were part of Shore, and the people that I knew we were going to bring into Shore, and said, okay, let's do it. And then this was my step out into the sweat equity game, where you work hard, the idea is you go forward a few years, and then eventually, if the company does well enough, you sell it, and then you take a portion of that, and that'll help you grow to your next step. So that was the sales pitch that Darcy gave me, and I bid, and I joined Shore Solutions. At the same time, I still kept going with Figari, because I saw that Figari was had an interesting opportunity, because we built a lot of call centers at that time, or BPO offices, and we used other parties to build these. I did have that skill set from working at Tierra International in 2005, and I had some people there that I knew that I could bring on board to build. So in order to save money for Shore, I built a lot of stuff for Shore at cost. But at the same time, I started building for other people as well. So in 2012, we did about four different BPO sites, and then then 6 the next year, and then 8 I think last year, something along those lines. But the most important thing that we did was we started taking long leases and fitting them out so that you have a ready-to-go call center. And we didn't want to compete with the service office group, because the service office group generally works with small groups, and they charge for certain. I got to be careful what I say because my wife is in that business. But they charge for everything, and we didn't want to do that. I didn't want to have 100 staff going around and managing our sites. So I said, let's get these long-term leases, lock in these guys for a couple of years. They don't have to use the CapEx to build it out. We'll do it on an OpEx model for them, providing they can give us a long period of upfront cash so that we can get going. We don't have to be in debt. So we started that, and we now have 5 sites in the Philippines, in BGC, with over 700 seats. Glad to say 0 debt, and everything's been paid off because we've done it at the right time. We only built when we had cash. So the idea is just build when you have cash, build up, get it going. Thankfully, we haven't had to pay too many commissions because it's been people referring, and that's all about your ecosystem. At the end of last year, I decided, love the Philippines, I think it's going to go fantastically well for the next few years, but I still would like to balance some of the risks. So I opened up Figari Australia in November of last year, where we were able to sign a deal with a top 50 company in Australia, where they have 40 buildings. These guys, they own cinemas, movie theaters, and they own quite a few hotels, but they saw what we were doing in the Philippines, and they said, hey, this could be very interesting for Australia, not necessarily for call centers, but for service leases. We have a couple of buildings, Chris. Would you be able to do it for us in Sydney to start with? So I have a building going up in Sydney that we're fitting out in George Street, and another one in Double Bay. And provided we do those well, we should be able to try and get the rest of the 40 over the next few years, which should be very exciting. And then lastly, we're doing one ourselves without that group in Collins Street in Melbourne as well, which is about 1,200 square meters. So that's my kind of career path that we've gone through. And as far as the lessons learned, and I just thought I'd probably talk about some of the fun things that I've seen in my life over this journey. And this one I like. Wisdom is a lifetime worth of listening when you would have otherwise preferred to talk. When I was 18 years old, my very first mentor was a guy named Lloyd Ross, and we were drinking in a bar together. And he said to me, you know, Chris, in a little rusty voice, you know, Chris, when you're 20 to 30, it's all about making money. It's all about learning. Okay. And you can't talk. You can't talk? No, you can't talk. And 30 to 40, it's about making money. Making money, and you're still learning, you're making, and you can talk, but just a little bit. Okay. And then 40 to 50, it's about spending money. And keep in mind, this guy had all sorts of fancy cars. You're 18 years old. I'm looking up at him. In fact, the name Figari used to be the number plate of his on a horse that he had, which means to the moon and back in Greek, so he tells me. But so he said between 20 and 30, it's learning how to make money. 30 and 40, you're making money, you're still learning. 40 and 50, you're able to spend. And then I said, and then what happens? And he said, then you become 60 like me, and you little shits like you can look at me. Listen. I was like, okay, well, there you go. So, but wisdom is a lifetime worth listening when you would otherwise prefer to talk. Motivation. So I think this is one of the most important things. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and all of those theories that you learned in school, the reality is, for motivation, you motivate by being inspired by yourself. If you know what you like, and if you like it, your people will like it with you. You can't motivate somebody by telling them, this is what you need to do, this is how you're going to get it. And money isn't always the best motivator. But I've always, like I said, I've always appreciate when people say I work together, because passion creates success. You need to lead by example. Never tell people what you want. It's always better if others believe in the same thing. And if I look at it from a construction point of view, there's times where we'll go into a room and we'll say, okay, seems like there aren't any windows in this room. And it shouldn't have windows, and there's every reason it should have a window. But rather than me telling the architect, put in a window over there so that the guys can see, come on, that's common sense. It's better to say, hey, hold on a second. what's happening out there? Do you think would it be better if the guys could see in or see out? And quite often the response will be, you know, boss, why don't we put in a window over here? That might be a good idea. And once that ownership is transferred to the architect, where he says, let's put the window in there, he owns that. He's responsible for making sure that that's good. And then no more do you have to do, because if he does a lousy job, you say, well, you were the one who told me to put the window in there. Okay, so motivate your team. Be a part of your team and be passionate about it. So in the Philippines, I've always enjoyed the sayings that somehow get messed up. You know, and one of them is, it's a blessing in the sky, you know, rather than it's a blessing in disguise. Or you're barking at the wrong dog. And this is probably among them one of my favorite ones. We'll burn that bridge when we get there. Don't burn bridges. That's the most important part. Life is too short, and so is your ecosystem. If you're serious about business, you'll essentially be involved in sales. Everybody becomes a salesman. If you want to run your business or be the top of your business, you're in sales. And guess what? Today's competitor might be tomorrow's partner. Your employee below you might be your manager next year. And that's just the way it is. So don't burn bridges. And lastly, as a quick tip, if anybody, if you ever have an angry email and you had a few beers, put it in the outbox and don't send it till the next day. Mentors, partners, and ecosystems. So, let me start with mentors. Everybody that I know or have read about has had a mentor, whether it be Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, all sorts of people. Everybody's had a mentor. Because the reality is, we're all maturing. And especially as young leaders, we're maturing now, we'll be different in 5 years, we'll be different in 10 years from now. But there's nothing better than having somebody that can guide you and mentor you through that. As Richard said earlier, it's really important. These old guys, they actually do have something to say for a little while, and then we can put it to pass it later. But, and on top of that, with that guidance, that again falls into your ecosystem. And the other thing is, you've got, for me, I've had partners. There's that question, is it better to have a partner or not? My grandmother will always tell me the only partner you need in life is God, Chris. But personally for me, I've had partners as I've gone through, because there isn't anybody that can understand how it is to be in that ditch than your partner. And it's nice to bounce ideas off your partner when you're in that ditch and help you strategically to get out of it. But choose wisely when you choose your partner, because there are going to be bad days, and you need to be able to ensure that it's not a 6-month thing, it's a many years thing. So you have to have balancing characteristics and personalities at work. Faces the music, and empty your outbox. So this is all about being proactive. A million people have a million ideas, but you need to execute on them. Otherwise, the ideas happen. You need to be proactive and responsive about what you have to do. Empty the outbox. And if you empty your outbox, you'll sleep better at night. Get it done, and part of that is stress relief, because if you're not sleeping well at night, you won't be proactive for the rest of your dealings of the week to come and months to come. And the last one is have a go. I won't read you this poem by Theodore Roosevelt, or what he wrote here. I don't know if it's a poem or not, but what he wrote here. But it's a fantastic, fantastic writing. He talks about being in the arena, right? And I love this, because in order to have a go and go out there, you got to get in, right? And he talks about it's better to be in with your brow sweating, just busting it out in that arena, rather than dealing with those timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. So have a go. If you fail, you learn. If you learn, you'll do better.